Hello and welcome to episode 110 of Glitch Report. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the streams, the stream of dreams, the show of shows, and everything in between. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree. That's linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads. Had a little bit of controversy over at Threads for what I had to say. Listen, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and I get that to some extent. But I had some things to say about Star Wars Outlaws that some people didn't take too kindly to. I wasn't like out there trying to push buttons or anything like that, because at the end of the day, like, I kind of said my piece with Star Wars Outlaws. I actually went back and played some more Star Wars Outlaws. We'll maybe give our final thoughts on Star Wars Outlaws, but I kind of said my piece about Star Wars Outlaws on the podcast last week, and my big takeaway coming from that show was I would much rather be enjoying the game. If the game was the same, but I could just find things about it that I really, really liked or appreciate what that game played like and all of that stuff, I would much rather do that. I would trade my experience that I had with Star Wars Outlaws in a heartbeat for what it has done to me, which is, it's not like it that's maybe a extreme way to describe it, but like I would have rather enjoyed my time with Star Wars Outlaws than not. And I think, anybody who gets into this, who wants to, this is in like podcasting about games and content creation, all that stuff. I think those that go into this being like, oh, I would, I want to be upfront and honest with the people, I want to keep it real, I think would not speak in such absolute terms as like, oh, it's the worst game ever, or it's terrible, I hate it. Like, I don't think Star Wars Outlaws is a good game. In fact, I think it's a bad game. But other than that, I don't really have like seething negative opinions on the game. I just don't think the gameplay is very good. That being said, that didn't stop people on Instagram Threads from getting all up in my ass about it. We'll maybe talk about that later. Because I don't want to just spend this whole podcast talking about Star Wars Outlaws again and again and again, because this is a beefy podcast. This is a thick show that we got planned for today. First thing I want to do is do review roundups for both Astrobot and Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Two big new games this week. With a decent amount of review coverage kind of out the gate for both of those games. We'll start things off with Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. As always, I'm pulling this data from OpenCritic.com. OpenCritic.com has Space Marine 2 with a strong rating, with a top average critical rating of 83%, with 90% of critics recommending the game. So if this was Rotten Tomatoes, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 would have a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes if it was a movie. Eurogamer gave it a 4 out of 5, saying that Space Marine 2's campaign is a spectacular and mostly thrilling follow-up to the original, but the game's grisly combat shines best in its new cooperative operations mode. So there is a single player story mode in Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 for you to chew through, but it also has multiplayer modes. I believe it has both a cooperative multiplayer mode as well as a competitive multiplayer mode. However, things a little uneven across the board when it comes to reviews. PC Gamer, 60 out of 100, saying that fans of Warhammer 40k will be delighted by the spectacle and authenticity, but ultimately disappointed by messy action and unengaging multiplayer. IGN, 8 out of 10, saying Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 may not break the third-person shooter mold, but it looks amazing, makes good use of its Warhammer lore, and has brutal combat that just feels great. Games Radar Plus, 4 out of 5, the best third-person shooter I've played in years. Space Marine 2, this is from GameSpot. GameSpot giving Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 an 8 out of 10, saying Space Marine 2 is a fantastic sequel that builds on its predecessor in every way, bombarding you with an overwhelming enemy, with an overwhelming enemy and chaotic action that makes you feel like a small part of a larger war. Kotaku did not give a score. They don't give scores for the reviews, but they said, come for the 12-hour campaign, stay for the co-op mode, all about becoming the ultimate alien killer. Rock, Paper, Shotgun unscored as well, saying a weighty ramble through the 40K universe with some excellent environments and joyful jetpacks. I've not kept up to date with Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. I haven't. That's on me. Reading these reviews, I'm actually pretty happy with it. That kind of puts that game on my radar in a way that it hadn't been before. However, maybe the only thing that kind of trips me up about the game is I think a 12-hour campaign is a little short. I would have preferred, and you know what, like maybe if I had played it, I would have felt differently. But honestly, I think it being 12 hours instead of maybe closer to 16 to 20 is maybe not ideal in my opinion. But, you know, they do have the cooperative mode. They do have the multiplayer modes and stuff like that, if that is your thing. But overall, good reviews for Space Marine 2. Again, that is a 83 average on OpenCritic, with 90% of critics recommending Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. Astrobot also sport Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. It's on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PC, if that is your thing. Astrobot, only available on PlayStation 5. If you remember, this Astrobot game is a follow-up to the free Astrobot game that is available on your PS5 right now. So just pause for a moment and say, if you have not played that Astrobot, do yourself a favor and go and play that, because that is, up until now, I'm not trying to tip my hand to what these reviews are looking like, but up until now, people were saying that Astrobot game that's free on PlayStation 5 is one of the best PlayStation 5 exclusives on the console. Like, it's one of the best PS5 games you can play. This new Astrobot game, currently sitting at a 95 average, with 100% of critics recommending the game. Oh, I should also mention, before we get too ahead of ourselves, just from like a math standpoint, that was 90% of critics recommending Space Marine 2 with 75 critical reviews. So just to stress, 74 critical reviews available for Astrobot, with 100% of critics recommending the game. IGN out of the gate with a 9 out of 10, saying, a very inventive platformer in its own right, Astrobot is particularly special for anyone with a place in their heart for PlayStation. Eurogamer 5 out of 5, saying Sony's glossy mascot gets an outing filled with imagination and loving craft. Games Radar Plus 5 out of 5, saying Astrobot doesn't just deliver on the promise and potential displayed in the PS5 pack-in demo Astro's Playroom, but soars above and beyond to serve up a near-perfect platformer to rival and possibly surpass the best of Mario's Mushroom Kingdom romps. GameSpot 9 out of 10, saying Team Asobi cements itself as an essential PlayStation studio with an imaginative platformer for the ages. Kotaku unscored, saying for what it's worth, for what it is though, Astrobot is incredible, and what it is worth and that is worth celebrating here and now. I just can't help walking away from the experience with a bittersweet taste in my mouth, and I hope that someday soon we don't have to look to gaming's past for the best bits of it all. Excuse me, got a little twisted up there. But basically, hope that someday soon we don't have to look to gaming's past for its best bits of it all. And I think that's because in Astrobot there is a lot of references to Sony's past, right? I believe even Crash Bandicoot, now owned by Microsoft, makes an appearance in Astrobot. So it's this idea that, like, you know how in Guardians of the Galaxy, 3, I should mention, spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy 3. But you know how in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, that movie almost goes out of its way to tug on your heartstrings in terms of the story around Rocket Raccoon and the experiments that he's with and all that stuff. You know how like it almost feels exhausting the way it just wants to target your heartstrings. I get the sense that maybe Astrobot is kind of going for something like that, but instead of it being a sense of sadness and empathy, it's more of a feeling of nostalgia, which I think is a dangerous drug. I've talked about nostalgia in the past. I'm not the biggest fan. That being said, they seem to have pulled it off. Like, I don't think many people are sitting here, with the exception maybe of Kotaku, are sitting here being like, it's just a shame it reminds me of the things that I know and love, which is often the case with like cheap, pops for nostalgia and things like that. Going through the rest of the reviews, again, pretty solid, pretty positive. Video Games Chronicles, as always, shout out to Video Games Chronicles. They gave Astrobot a 5 out of 5, saying, Astrobot isn't simply an enjoyable platformer with some nostalgia tying it together. It is a generationally impressive entry in the genre that understands PlayStation at an atomic level. The sheer level of joy the game produces makes it impossible to compare to anything other than Mario's very best adventure. Astro is no longer a vector through which to reference PlayStation icons. He is a PlayStation icon. I don't think you could give any higher praise to Video Games Chronicles listen, I love Video Games Chronicles, but I was going to say, I don't think you give any higher praise to Astrobot if you tried. Good reviews for Astrobot, amazing reviews for Astrobot, and good reviews for Warhammer. Again, that is a 95 average for Astrobot, with 100% of critics recommending it out of 75 reviews. Good reviews all around today. Very happy with it. And I wanted to do this. I thought this would be fun. The good folks over at Eurogamer are celebrating their anniversary, their 25th anniversary celebrations all around to Eurogamer. I think Eurogamer do fantastic work. If you haven't had a chance, go over to the Eurogamer site, check them out. They do good work. They are doing it's an interesting top 100 games that they're doing. It's an interesting top 100 games that they are doing. They've been rolling it out over the last little bit, so currently they're up to 26 out of 100. You can go and read it now if you want, but I think it'd be fun to maybe talk about these games once the full list is out. When I made this list, when I collected the list originally, it was only the top 50. Now it is the top 100. But I'm thinking maybe we'll check out their top 100 games and talk about it when the list comes out. But we got news. And Sony is out there giving us a whole lot of news. If you don't remember, and I'm going to pull up the history of this game for a moment, in case you forgot. So, the video game, the first-person shooter, the competitive first-person shooter, the multiplayer first-person shooter, Concord, came out August 23rd. Not too long ago. Made by Firewalk Studios and published by Sony Interactive. Firewalk Studios is a company that has been founded by ex-Bungie people and stuff like that. Like, it's not a bunch of scrubs that got together to make a game. These are people with lineage and history in video games and stuff like that, especially as relates to multiplayer first-person shooters. August 23rd, that game came out. They have announced that the game will be taken offline September 6th. So it is September 5th now. By the time you're listening to the non-live version of this podcast, the game will be offline. They have decided to take Concord offline, and a couple of reasons. It did not get great reviews. The reviews for it were not great. I shared my opinions on the beta. And the problem with that game is that it really didn't do anything new or inventive in an incredibly I would say, hyper competitive market like competitive first person shooters. If you are going to be a shooter, you have to compete with the likes of not just first person shooters, but third person shooters, right? So if you're Concord, you have to compete, with the Call of Duties of the world, not just Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, but also Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and not just Black Ops 6, but also the people that play the free-to-play version of Warzone. You see what I'm saying? But it's not just that. You also have to compete with other free-to-play shooters like Overwatch 2, like Destiny 2, like Tom Clancy's The Division. We're going to talk about Tom Clancy's Xdefiant in a moment, but you'd have to compete with games like Xdefiant as well. Fortnite, of course, you would have to compete with Apex Legends. We talk about Apex Legends on this very podcast. You'd have to compete with Fortnite. And I know some of these games are third person, some of these games are first person. But if you're saying, hey, we're going to provide you with a multiplayer only competitive first person shooter, we're going to charge $40 for it. Well, it's going to get compared to the free to play games, and it's going to get compared to the premium games, no matter what you were trying to do. And unfortunately, in Concord, even when I played it, it felt like a competent game that didn't have much new, inventive, or exciting ideas going for it. And the reviews kind of said as much and maybe hammered home even harder that it's not going to be good enough, or it may not be good enough in the competitive landscape that it exists in, right? If you plunk down full price for Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, just an example, you get the single player campaign, right? The single player campaign might only be like 6 hours, but whatever. You get a single player campaign, you get the full multiplayer experience, and you get zombies mode in Call of Duty Black Ops 6, right? You don't have to pay a dime to get Overwatch 2. Just download it and play it, right? Same thing with Destiny. The odds were never in Concord's favor, right? Especially with how it played and how it performed. And I would also argue with how it was marketed. It really felt like Sony was sending Concord out to die. And I don't know why, right? I kind of felt this way similarly with Days Gone, but at least Days Gone had 3 ideas going. It was like you're a biker guy on a motorcycle, and there's a lot of zombies in this zombie game. But anyways, Days Gone didn't feel like it had Days Gone felt like it had more legs to stand on than something like Concord, and also Days Gone went on to be a somewhat mildly successful game in terms of sales. Concord, on the other hand, apparently sold as few as 25,000 copies across PS5 and PC since releasing on August 23rd. So there is a blog post on the PlayStation blog, where PlayStation blog posts tend to exist. And it was an announcement that was made by Ryan Ellis, the game director at Sony's Firewalk Studios. I'd like to read to you now what Mr. Ellis had to say. Concord fans, we've been listening closely to your feedback since the launch of Concord on PlayStation 5 and PC, and want to thank everyone who has joined the journey aboard the North Star. Your support and passionate community that has grown around the game has meant the world to us. However, while many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognize that other aspects of the game and our initial launch did not land the way we'd intended. Therefore, at this time, we have decided to take the game offline beginning September 26, 2024, and explore options, including those that will better reach our players. While we determine the best path ahead, Concord sales will cease immediately, and we will begin to offer a full refund for all gamers who purchased the game for PS5 or PC. Once refunded, players will no longer have access to the game, which cost about $40 US. PS5 players who bought the game from the PlayStation Store or PlayStation Direct will receive a refund to their original payment methods, although Sony did say that it may take 30 to 60 days to appear on bank statements. For customers who have purchased a physical game at a retailer location outside of PlayStation directly, please refer to the refund process of the retailer you purchased it from to obtain your refund. PC players who purchase the game through Steam and Epic Game Store will be refunded over the coming days. Gonna stop you right there. If you purchased it from a physical retailer, I don't think they're going to give you your money back. Unless Sony has reached out to that retailer and said, hey, take the game back. Please process the refund. I bet if you went to a GameStop, a Walmart, a Target, a Best Buy, trying to think where else you might buy a physical video game, Amazon, I think if you said, hey, I opened up this game and played it and I'd like a refund, they're going to probably tell you to kick rocks. So it's unfortunate that Sony maybe doesn't have an actual plan for physical retailers. They're just telling people to go back to the place that they bought it from and hope for the best. That being said, let's do some quick math. Well, fuzzy math. It's not actually quick math. They sold as few as 25,000 copies of the game. And that's across PS5 and PC. PC, there were no physical editions of the game anyways. So we're purely talking physical copies of the PS5 game. Of those 25,000 copies split across PS5 and PC, I have a feeling that more PS5 people bought it than PC people, but whatever. How many of those copies do you really think were physical copies? 5,000? 5,000 were, I mean, the math shows that more and more people are buying the games digitally. So on one hand, I think it really, really sucks that people who bought it at a GameStop probably won't get their money back. I mean, I have not seen reports that GameStop has been accepting those refunds, but we're talking 5,000 people, roughly, maybe more, who may not be able to get their physical refund back depending on the retailer they bought it from. Unfortunately, I think it's a scenario where Sony did the math and realized that they don't have to support those retailers because there's not that many people in the first place. It's unfortunate the way things have gone for Concord, but on the other hand, it's probably for the best that Sony saves face when it comes to this game. At the time of publishing this report that I'm getting from Video Games Chronicles, there were 34 players playing Concord on Steam. Now, the final thing that I'm going to say, and this is Video Games Chronicles editorializing this, but to an extent I back them up on this. The article reads, Concord's performance represents a major setback for PlayStation Live service ambitions. Sony said last November that it was halving the number of live service games it planned to release over the next few years in a bid to ensure they met quality expectations. The following month, Naughty Dog confirmed that Sony had canceled plans to release The Last of Us Online following several years in development. I've said this before, I'll say it one more time. Sony has done a very, very good job of coming across as the marquee single-player story-based AAA console manufacturer, right? If you want your, big and, bold maybe is maybe the wrong word because oftentimes those stories are pretty, standard. They're just high quality, big budget. But if you come to it for these big budget story games, I mean, so Microsoft is trying to do that and they've been doing so, but they don't have the prestigious, association to their franchise the way that Sony has with Spider-Man and God of War and Uncharted and The Last of Us being turned into this hit HBO series and Horizon Forbidden West and Zero Dawn and all of that stuff. And I think that actually might be why people are so happy with Astrobot, because it feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like a video game that is trying to be a fun video game first and foremost and not this big, bold method of storytelling. That being said, when you do a big, bold, single-player story game, you really only get the chance to sell that game once. Maybe you get to sell DLC and expansion pack. They certainly did that with games like Horizon Forbidden West. But there's not much else to the tail end of the recouping of money. You buy the game and then that's it. And I'm not saying they had plans to sell a lot of additional content in Concord, but if Concord had taken off even to a mild success, I would not have been surprised to see them selling costumes and season passes and battle passes and stuff like that if it had been in a mild to moderate success, which is where the money is. It's getting players on treadmills with the initial offering of a relatively solid, decent live service game that they maybe hook their friends into and their family into, or their favorite streamers, or this game just came out and in 3 months they're already going to be having a Halloween event and I'd love to see what the Halloween costumes are, or whatever. So I don't know if Sony's going to go back to trying to make those single player big budget games, or if they're going to try to make fewer but better multiplayer games. But we're off to a pretty bad start when you think about Concord and the canceled Last of Us Online. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk some news as it pertains to Star Wars Outlaws and more. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. Let's talk some Star Wars Outlaws. Now, this is where I had made this next news story is a news story that I commented on Instagram threads and got flack's a strong word. I mean, the problem for me is that, like, I just don't take a lot of this stuff, like a lot of opinion-based stuff on social media, seriously. It's almost like I would pertain it to like a drive-by shooting. Sometimes people are putting a lot of thought and effort into, expressing and forming their opinion. But at the end of the day, it's going to move past me. And drive-bys may be a bad example because some innocent people genuinely get hit in drive-bys and all that stuff, and it's violence and it's brutal, but it's going to go past you, right? You can feel a certain way about somebody's opinion, but like, some people were upset and annoyed and didn't seem to take what I said very kindly, and they were not even people who followed me on Instagram threads. I felt like the thought police were after me, and I hate to use that word because I just don't take it that seriously, but Ubisoft's share price has fallen to a 10-year low since the release of Star Wars Outlaws. Analysts say the game hasn't sold as well as expected at launch. This also is kind of tied to the Star Wars creative director, the Star Wars Outlaws creative director being a bit disappointed in its review scores. Now, I'm actually not going to get into the dropping of the share price, because if you look at, because I'm not a stock market expert, I don't know, people that do, like, go look, that's all that you do that if that's your thing. There were some analysts, like some folks over at JP Morgan, that said that Star Wars Outlaws has struggled to meet our sales expectations despite positive critical reviews, and said that JP Morgan analysts expected Star Wars Outlaws to sell about 7.5 million units by the end of 2025. Based on current trends, have now suggested it'll be 5.5. It's not 2 million. I don't know. I don't know if 2 million's a lot to Ubisoft or not. But there seems to be some sort of financial hit, whether it's a reaction to social media, whether it's a reaction to critical responses, or whether it's a reaction to actual sales. Like, there seems to be some sort of reaction, albeit a negative reaction, to Star Wars Outlaws. So keep that in mind, right? That there's analysts already saying that they're expecting it to sell roughly 2 million less copies than they originally thought. The share price did drop to some extent. The headline from Video Games Chronicles says that the share price has hit a near 10-year low since the release of Star Wars Outlaws. The creative director, a bit disappointed in the response. That's Ubisoft's Massive's Julian Gertie, suggested he'd like the scores to be a bit higher for the game. He was speaking to Games Radar at the time. Now, currently the scores for the game are 75 on Metacritic for Xbox Series. Metacritic kind of separates it by platform, which makes sense if the PC version is really fucked or the PS5 or whatever, but it's actually pretty average and even across all the platforms. So it's 75 on Xbox, 76 on PS5, and 77 on PC. The creative director said, "I'm a little disappointed with the Metacritic. Of course, recognition from press and critics is very important to us, but players are really connecting with what we did. There's a level of pride, happiness, and sense of accomplishment amongst the team, and there's still more to come from the game. This is a game that millions of people are going to play for years and years, and we're never going to stop improving it." Well, that's a lie. We'll probably stop improving it, but today my mind is not on stopping improving it. I was about to say, wait a minute, hold on, and then they beat me to it. Okay, you know what? This Ubisoft Massive director's all right. I'm so glad they said that. Whew. Oh, it was almost, I was scared for a moment. I'm like, oh no, what did you say? Okay. Here's the thing. I think if 75 is out of 100, which I'm assuming it is, I think those review scores are incredibly generous based on my time playing the game. I do not like Star Wars Outlaws. I think it is a bad game. Where would I put it on a review score is almost irrelevant because I didn't finish the game. If I was reviewing the game, I think I would have an even worse time with it. Because the time pressure, the crunch would be on to play through what I feel is a pretty bland, sluggish, muddy, and tedious experience, particularly when it comes to the core shooting and the core stealth in the game. So on one hand, there's this part of me that's like, I guess I could chip away at it over the next couple of months if I really wanted to. But also, I played it. I'm pretty confident in my opinion, and I'm going to walk away from this game. Like this, congratulations, you made it. This is the last episode where I share my opinion on Star Wars Outlaws because I don't want to think about it. I don't want to I don't want to play it. I have family and friends coming over today. They haven't seen it. If they want to see it, I'll show it to them. But other than that, I don't think I want to play it. So I posted this on Instagram Threads. This is exactly what I wrote on Instagram Threads. I said, I don't make video games, but if Ubisoft is disappointed in their share price dropping because of Star Wars Outlaws, next time they can try to make a good video game instead. A couple things. I don't know how much of an influence Star Wars Outlaws directly had on the share price. I don't know. Call me ignorant. That's my bad. Right? But what I said was, I don't make video games, but if Ubisoft is disappointed in their share price dropping because of Star Wars Outlaws, next time they can try making a good video game instead. And what I got was a decent amount of flack from people who failed to recognize that what I said was purely opinion based. In fact, I had comments. And the reason I bring this up is because this was easily my most popular post on Instagram threads to date, which is unfortunate because I would rather it had been about something that I enjoyed, but here we are complaining about stuff I don't like. People were suggesting in the comments for that post that I presented my opinion as factual, that I should have said the game is not for me instead of calling it bad. I also had a lot of people assuming that I don't like other Ubisoft games because of this post. And that by not being able to get into the game, I shouldn't have said it was bad. And some people were suggesting that saying something is bad isn't an opinion. It's actually objective to say that Star Wars Outlaws is bad. And that's why I kind of felt like, oh, the thought police are after me. Like, what the hell's going on? I don't understand it. This is so weird. I really like a lot of Ubisoft games. Assassin's Creed Origins, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Ghost Recon Wildlands. Hell, I even kind of like Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Far Cry 3, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, Far Cry 4, Far Cry New Dawn, The Division 2, just to name a few. I like a lot of Ubisoft games. And maybe it's because I like Ubisoft games that I don't like Outlaws. I don't know. But a lot of those games have a couple of things in common. Whether it's Far Cry or, Ghost Recon Wildlands or Breakpoint or, Assassin's Creed. A lot of those games offer stealth and, guns blazing combat, for lack of a better word. I just find that all of the shooting, all of the action, and most of the stealth in those other Ubisoft games to be far more enjoyable than what is available in Star Wars Outlaws. Like, the core gameplay of those games blows Star Wars Outlaws out of the water. Again, I think the shooting is really muddy in Star Wars Outlaws. I think that stealth is tedious. It is sluggish. It is annoying. I don't really have that problem with Assassin's Creed Valhalla or Far Cry 4 or whatever. I know Far Cry 4 is almost a 10-year-old game, but the formula for Ubisoft hasn't really changed in a really, really long time. I would argue if you played one Ubisoft game, you've played them all. So I don't know what that reaction was. I imagine it's people that are just maybe a little sensitive about people disliking a game that they really like. But I go into social media posts knowing that what I have to say is my opinion and that everyone else has their opinion. Now, if we want to talk about history, if we want to talk about facts, that's one thing. But if I'm confident in my opinion, so much so that when I state it, it comes across as fact, I don't know if that's necessarily on me. I don't know if that's necessarily my problem. And I hate to be like, oh, it's somebody else's problem. It's just that I think people give me too much credit on social media, which is weird because don't you want as much credit as possible for the ego boost, for the followers, for the likes, for the comments, for the retweets? Like, wouldn't you want people to, take what you say as gospel? But like, not when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws. I don't want people thinking that like my opinion is the end all be all of opinions. Like, I would much rather my opinion be the end all be all of something I liked. That would be nice to like have people come together about something that we all enjoy. Instead, I have people saying, that I shouldn't say that it's a bad game. And that just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not a bad game. Well, first of all, I will fully admit when I think something is bad, but I still like it. Like if you like something ironically, right? Like if I was sitting here being like, aha, it's so bad, but I like it, I would have said so. I would have because sarcasm doesn't come across very well, especially in text-based posts on social media. And I hate to turn this into like a social media 101, discussion, but like the real thing is that like you see this drive-by of a post, you don't know a lot about the person, you make a lot of assumptions, like people just being like, well, if you don't like the Ubisoft formula, why'd you play it? And I'm like, dog, the Ubisoft formula is better in Breakpoint, one of the weakest Ubisoft open world action games. It's still better than Outlaws. Like, people make assumptions. But it seems like there is some sort of reaction. I don't want to necessarily be part of that reaction. Like, I'm going to really try to avoid conversing with people about Star Wars Outlaws going forward. And things like that. I was listening to the Big Red Barrel UK podcast. They were talking about it. Tim over at the Big Red Barrel UK podcast really, really likes it. And I would love to like that game the way that Tim does. I would love to. I would much rather do that than sit here and be like, have to justify my negativity towards the game. But I think that we just see different things in the game. One thing I'll say is, I'm getting choked up talking about Star Wars Outlaws, is there is a card game called Sabacc in Star Wars Outlaws, like a mini game. I was really not looking forward to playing Sabacc, but I got a chance to play it last night when I was playing through the game a little bit more. Sabacc actually seems like one of the best things in the game, and it's not because like I'm like weirdly addicted to it. I'm like, man, if they had just made a fully fledged Sabacc game, that's better than the shooting in Star Wars Outlaws. Anyways, yeah, I don't want to keep beating it to death. I don't want to be negative because I think a lot of people, make assumptions like, because the problem is that like people that assume the worst about my opinion based on that post are also people that assume like other weird things about it, that think that like, I don't like the game because you play as a woman, or I don't like the game because it's like woke or whatever. Like those are not, like, none of that has to do with why I don't like the game. I would much rather play as like a badass Cave S and still have her be Cave S than this kind of awkward, like bumbling Mr. Magoo, but not that funny. Oh my God. Can you imagine if it was, but like, what if they fully committed to like a Mr. Magoo, like fucking Frank Drebin ass scoundrel? That would be so much better than this like kind of weirdly awkward character. Anyways, I'm done. That's it. I'm done. Put a bow on it. I'm done. Because I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy feeling negative about a game like this. Right? I don't enjoy feeling negative about this. It was easier when it was a game like for what it's worth, I think Suicide Squad Kill the Justice, not to compare fucking apples to oranges, I would much rather play Star Wars Outlaws than Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, for what it's worth. And I actually spent more time with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League because I was like, there has to be something here that justifies its existence. And at least Star Wars Outlaws does that. It just doesn't do it in a particularly interesting and enjoyable way. Whereas Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League feels like a genuine waste of everyone's time. I guess I will say, if I was to compare apples to oranges. Let's move on. Warner Brothers knows where their bread is buttered, and they said that a Hogwarts Legacy follow-up is a major priority for the company, saying that a successor to the game is expected to come a couple of years down the road. They also have that new Quidditch game, which is out now, free on PlayStation Plus. Unfortunately, we got some layoffs. We got actually like 3 different chunks of layoffs, news stories. Rocksteady is reportedly the latest studio to suffer layoffs, with Suicide Squad's poor sales to blame. Now, one employee was reportedly told they'd been made redundant in the middle of paternity leave. Sources have told Eurogamer that numerous employees have been made redundant over the last month, with its QA department more than halved from 33 to 15, as well as non-QA job losses too. According to sources, the job losses are directly linked to the release of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, with its poor sales specifically mentioned as the reason for what it describes as, quote, restructuring. While a number of job layoffs are said to be junior staff, they also have said it includes some developers who have been at Rocksteady for more than 5 years. I hope everybody lands on their feet. I wish everybody at Rocksteady the best of luck. I would also say that I heard there were some reports that Rocksteady are going to be the people that are working on the next Hogwarts Legacy update. Like, my understanding is they're doing a big Hogwarts Legacy update, like deluxe something. I forget what they were calling it. But the rumors were that Rocksteady was actually going to be working on that Hogwarts Legacy for the next big content update for that game. I hope that everybody lands on their feet and continues to work on games, especially after they get all of the content done for Suicide Squad, assuming they're still working on it. All of the content done for Hogwarts Legacy, and they can eventually move on to another game. Hopefully a more single-player story-based game that Rocksteady are so good at. The Until Dawn remake studio Ballistic Moon has also been experiencing significant layoffs, but they remain focused on supporting the launch of the PS5 and PC game. Oh, man. In a statement, Woking, UK-based Ballistic Moon said it was making staff cuts to secure the future of the studio, which remains focused on supporting Until Dawn's launch in October. The studio was founded in 2020 by Duncan Kershaw, Neil McCowan, and Chris Lamb, who all previously worked together at Supermassive Games, the developer behind the original Until Dawn. As the game industry continues to face complex challenges, we at Ballistic Moon are confronted with some difficult realities. It is with deep regret and a heavy heart that we must make the tough decision to significantly scale down our team to secure the future of our studio. This comes after our development of Until Dawn for PS5 and PC. We want to express our sincere gratitude to every team member for their hard work, dedication, and unwavering commitment to Ballistic Moon. Saying goodbye to such a talented and passionate group of people is incredibly difficult, and we are profoundly sorry for the impact this restructuring will have on our employees and their families. As we navigate this transition, Ballistic Moon remains focused on supporting the launch of Until Dawn and is committed to exploring new opportunities and collaborations for the future. So that game is out. The PS5 and PC version is out October 4th. A feature film based on Until Dawn is also being helmed by Lights Out, Annabelle Creation, and Shazam director David S. Sandberg, which started shooting last month. So that movie is coming along. And then the rest of the article from Video Games Chronicles talks about the Hollywood Reporter talking about the movie. And I'll tell you right now, I've said it before. An Until Dawn movie seems like the least necessary video game movie that has ever been made, because Until Dawn feels like you're playing through a movie. So unless, hear me out. Have you ever seen the movie Clue? The movie Clue is an incredible movie. Like, love the movie Clue. The fun thing about the movie Clue is that it takes inspiration from the board game to the point where there are multiple endings for the movie Clue based on who the culprit in the movie is. So the movie's kind of written and set up in a way where you don't know who the person is and all that stuff. And at the end, there's hints and stuff throughout the movie, but then in the end, there's one big reveal and they kind of explain, oh, why I did. It's almost like a Scooby-Doo moment of like, I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you dastardly kids and that damn dog. Like, it's kind of like the villain explaining their motivations and stuff in the movie Clue. If Until Dawn doesn't have something like that, then it's a complete waste of time as far as I go when it comes to making a movie. Like, there should be multiple endings for Until Dawn based on who lives and who dies. I just don't think we're going to get anything nearly as cool, but we'll see. The studio that worked on Visions of Mana is set to close as NetEase and Tencent reportedly scale back investments in Japan. Now, NetEase and Tencent are two of the biggest Chinese game developers, like tech companies. Like, they're big conglomerations. NetEase and Tencent got their fingers in a lot of different pies. And one of those pies being game development, game publishing. And unfortunately, it looks like Oka Studios, the developers behind Visions of Mana, is set to close. Both Chinese companies have invested heavily in Japanese game development in recent years, acquiring numerous development studios and opening new ones. However, a Bloomberg report claims both companies are starting to rethink their strategy because it's yet to bear any significant fruit. According to the report, NetEase has cut all but a handful of jobs at Shibuya-based Oka, whose Visions of Mana was only just released last Thursday. The company reportedly plans to close the studio with the remaining staff overseeing the release of its final games first. While neither NetEase nor Tencent show any signs of wanting to completely pull out of Japan, the report claims that both companies are starting to rethink their strategy in the country, which saw them making large investments in an attempt to build a catalog of big-budget AAA games. NetEase's remaining studios in Japan include Grasshopper Manufacture, which is led by Suda51, Nagoshi Studio, which is led by Yakuza creator Toshihiro Nagoshi, Pincool, which is led by Dragon Quest 8 and 9 producer Ryotaro Ichimura, Studio Flare, led by Blaze Blue series producer Toshimichi Mori, and GP Track 50, which is led by Resident Evil 4 producer Hiroyuki Kobayashi. Man, I can't say regular English words, but I will kill it with the Japanese names. I'm a goddamn genius. Anyways, statement says, we are approaching a point where Tencent and NetEase begin to scrutinize their returns more closely, which is a Bernstein analyst that Robin Zhu told Bloomberg. Globally, the video gaming industry has retrenched post-COVID, and many large publishers have reduced headcount or scaled back investments. Anecdotally, the Japanese developers' desire to tightly control what can be done with their IP has sometimes been a source of friction, right? Because you have these companies that are like, we want energy drinks, we want full body-sized pillows, we want AI robot voice people, they want everything. They want cereal, they want everything. And like, you know, some of these developers might be like, hey, can we just make a game and then hopefully we stick around long enough to make another game or update that game or whatever? That would be nice. Let's see here. Both NetEase and Tencent have also investments in developers outside of Japan, with NetEase in particular recently launching numerous new studios in the United States. In April, Tencent significantly increased its shareholding in Remedy Entertainment, increasing its ownership of the Alan Wake studio to almost 15%. Like I said, NetEase and Tencent got their fingers in a lot of different pies, including some US-based studios. They are big, huge. Black Myth Wukong is supposed to come to Xbox at some point in time. This is actually another story I have about another game that's supposed to come to Xbox. But there's been some weird stuff going along with some of the Xbox versions of these games, saying that there's difficulty porting them or if it's some sort of exclusivity. It's really hard to say. But Black Myth Wukong has been delayed, but is not due to platform limitations raised to the Xbox. It was recently claimed that the PlayStation, that PlayStation has struck a console exclusivity deal for the game. Which, man, I bet Xbox really wished they had struck a deal with Game Science instead. If you don't know, Black Myth Wukong, made by Chinese developer and publisher Game Science, announced in June that the Xbox version of the action RPG had been pushed back due to internal quality concerns. It had originally expected to launch alongside the PS5 and PC versions on August 20th. They put out a statement, Microsoft put out a statement saying, as we said before, we're excited for the launch of Black Myth Wukong on Xbox Series X and S and are working with Game Science to bring the game to our platforms. This is something that Microsoft said to Forbes on Thursday. They did say that we'd prefer not to comment on the details made by our partners with other platform holders, but we can confirm that the delay is not due to Xbox platform limitations, that have been raised to us. But there's been plenty of speculation regarding the game's delayed Xbox release, with some questioning whether it may be related to difficulties in porting it to the Series S, an issue that has affected some games in the past, including Baldur's Gate 3. Announcing the delay in June, GnittWitt said, "We are currently optimizing the Xbox Series X and S version to meet our quality standards, so it won't release simultaneously with other platforms. We apologize for the delay and aim to minimize the wait for Xbox users. We will announce the release date as soon as it meets our quality standards." It was later claimed that the game was delayed due to a memory leak issue that was causing it to fail bug detection tests. However, Ford subsequently reported that the delay was due to Sony striking an undisclosed console exclusivity deal for the game. Black Myth Wukong has been a major hit. It has sold 10 million copies across all platforms in just 3 days, according to Game Science. Now, I bring this up because Antoria the Lost Song Studio says that the Xbox version is indefinitely delayed due to a lack of communication from Xbox. Now, I need to pull up if there was an update. Antoria, the developer claims it's stuck at the submission process and says that Xbox isn't replying to their requests for support when it comes to Antoria the Lost Song. The studio says Antoria has been a passion project of ours for years, and we cannot wait to see you bring the fight to the authors and put a finite end to the twisted, eternal play Canovasio. I don't know who Canovasio is. But even in the beautifully detailed world of Antoria, there's bound to be some darkness. Unfortunately, at this time, we have to announce an indefinite delay of the Xbox version. We understand how disappointing this news is to the Xbox community. Unfortunately, our best efforts and the hard work of our dedicated team we encountered challenges that have delayed our release on the Xbox platform. Want to emphasize that this is not a decision we've made lightly. While the statement didn't initially explain the reason for the delay in detail, some stated this started to speculate that it may be down to difficulties in porting the game to, say it with me now, the Xbox Series S, an issue that has affected some games in the past due to Xbox's typical insistence that the Series X games are released on Series S too. However, the studio then added a further message on Twitter claiming that the issue was actually what it called a lack of communication on Xbox's side. We believe that Xbox is blessed with a huge gaming community, and we would love to release Antoria on your platform as fast as possible, as we spend a lot of money and resources to make it happen. But this task is nearly impossible, with Microsoft taking months to reply to us when we have the game ready for submission. Whew. That is, that's spicy. That is, man. So, GameIndustry.biz has an update saying that Microsoft has reportedly apologized to the studio following issues of Antoria's Xbox certification, saying that the studio is now working closely with Microsoft to resolve the situation. They, the studio, Giamma, shared on social media that Xbox boss Phil Spencer and his team reached out to the studio helping to resolve the situation. They put out a statement on social media saying, "We are now working closely with Microsoft, and we hope this collaboration will lead to the game's release for Xbox as soon as possible." In a statement that was sent to GameIndustry.biz, Xbox says it's now taken the feedback into account, saying, "We've connected with Giamma Games and got great feedback that we will use to improve our process. We look forward to working with them to bring Antoria the Last Song to Xbox." The Antoria the Last Song CEO also apologized to the Xbox community for a choice that they were forced to make. The CEO said, "I prefer the game be perfect on 2 platforms rather than discrete on 3. So, the final news story is that the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection and Capcom Fighting Collection 2 are finally coming to Xbox. There was an outcry from Xbox users, but apparently there was a technical discussion with Xbox themselves that Capcom said on Tuesday both collections will be released on Xbox next year. So basically, in July, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection was announced for everything except Xbox. And then they said, we're doing a Capcom Fighting Collection 2, so that's 2 different fighting collections. Neither of them are coming to Xbox. Xbox fans were pissed. Microsoft reportedly talked to Capcom, and now Capcom will be bringing those games to Xbox next year. So both of them are coming out after these versions of on the other consoles are out. So you see what I'm saying, man? Like you see what I'm talking about? Like with Baldur's Gate 3 and Entoria, The Last Song, and Marvel vs. Capcom, and to a lesser extent, Black Myth Wukong. Like, what is going on at Xbox that they can't get these third-party games? I think a couple of things are happening. One, I think that Xbox users are probably the least likely to buy new games because of how entrenched Game Pass is with Xbox. I think an Xbox player is significantly less likely to buy and play a game like Entoria, The Last Song, knowing that they have so many choices that are available for Game Pass, or that they'd be willing to wait 6 months before they decided to play it, assuming that Entoria, The Last Song made it to Game Pass in 6 months or so. And if not, by then the game would be maybe half off or cheaper. Thus, they don't take the hit of paying full price for the game. So I do believe to some extent that Xbox is not selling a lot of third-party games due to Game Pass. But I also think that Xbox is not selling a lot of third-party games due to the fact that it is the least popular console currently available today. Meaning that if you make an Xbox version, it's not going to sell nearly as many copies regardless of Game Pass compared to something like PlayStation or even the Nintendo Switch. Now, some of these games are like the Capcom fighting games are old. They're very, very old games, meaning it would not take a lot of hardware power to run on something like a Nintendo Switch. So they may be not doing it because they're just thinking, what's the point? No one's going to buy it on Xbox anyways. You have something like Black Myth Wukong, where Sony is striking while the iron is hot and making it a console exclusive, at least temporarily. But then you also have games like Baldur's Gate and potentially Entoria, The Last Song, that are struggling to put their version on Xbox Series S because of the power difference between that and the Series X. If you also factor in that Microsoft may be unwilling to help some of these developers, I think there's a very, very big problem that could potentially come up if Microsoft doesn't do everything in their power to help these companies, to incentivize these companies, to encourage these companies to put their games out, their third-party games, out on Xbox, especially day one. Because, they didn't get Baldur's Gate for Game Pass after all this time. They could have, they didn't. They could have got Black Myth Wukong. They could have, they didn't. There might still be time to get Entoria, The Last Song on Game Pass. I don't know. And Microsoft has worked with Capcom in the past. Exoprimal came out day one on Game Pass. But there seems to be such a huge problem with the relationship that Xbox has formed with these studios, the perception or reality of porting these games to the Xbox Series S compared to how easy it is on the Series X due to the extra power. There's a big problem coming. And maybe this is why Microsoft is trying to make a new make a new console sooner rather than later, so that all that backwards compatibility stuff happens, but they have one main console. Because I think the Series S, while I still recommend consoles like the Series S to people who are very casual and people who have not gotten into games in a very, very long time, that don't care about backwards compatibility, that don't care about ecosystem, that don't care about anything, right? I tell folks, get a Series S. It's the cheapest console out there today. Get Game Pass and just have fun with the titles that are available, right? You don't have to pay any extra money. That's honestly what I tell people. Like, if they're a hardcore gamer, whatever, then yeah, maybe I'll be like, hey, have you heard of the PlayStation 5? Have you heard of, Elden Ring? Have you heard of whatever? But I still recommend it. But it's getting harder and harder to recommend, knowing that some companies can't even get their games out on Xbox Series S if they wanted to. We got a couple more news stories. I know this is going to be a thick, beefy podcast, but we're going to keep on going. There's a mobile game, how would I put this? A mobile game based on Destiny could get announced soon. Jeff Grubb, a reporter for Giant Bomb, said, yeah, this is real. Not a lot of people from Bungie working on it. It could get announced soon. It is reportedly being developed by NetEase. And it could get announced soon, but it's supposed to be a mobile game set in the Destiny world. Not a lot else to go off of, but hey, now you know. No Man's Sky continues to get updates. The last time I played it was when they did the new graphics update. That game looks gorgeous. It looks absolutely incredible, in my opinion. It's a gorgeous looking game, and it continues to receive updates. It just got a new update where you can finally go fishing in No Man's Sky. This is the Aquarius update. It also includes baits, cooking recipe, a personal fishing platform for players to construct, plus fishing pots used to bait and trap rare catches. And that's alongside new trophies, fishing logs to complete, and fishing equipment rewards. There's even a new limited edition expedition fishing themed that is starting soon. That's pretty neat. I wish I liked the gameplay more of No Man's Sky, because I think it's an incredibly ambitious and an interesting survival game. I think it's one of the better survival games that's out there right now for what it's worth. But hey, if I don't know what was stopping you from playing No Man's Sky, but if it was fishing, let me tell you something, brother. You got good news. I'd like to reintroduce a segment of the show that I like to call shit I should have talked about last week. I totally forgot. My bad. Nintendo had two different Nintendo Directs. One was a Nintendo Direct. The other was an Indie World Showcase. And there were a lot of different things shown at this Nintendo event. Some of it were like multi-platform stuff, so this might be, marketed or advertised as being Nintendo affiliated, but a lot of this stuff is also coming to other platforms as well, such as Balatro Friends of Jimbo. So Balatro is the poker-inspired roguelite game, that is taking the world by storm. It is announced that they're going to do crossovers with The Witcher 3, Vampire Survivors, Dave the Diver, and Among Us. And really the thing that they're doing is they're adding like Dave the Diver to the cards. So it's like different card packs for Balatro, which is a card game. Showed off more information around Neva. That game's coming out October 15th. That is the sad looking side scroller with the lady and the deer-like creature. Coffee Talk Tokyo was shown. That is the third game based in the Barista Sim series. It will take drink making and visual novel elements of the first 2 Coffee Talk games and transplant them to Japan, where you'll meet an all-new cast of mythical creatures with caffeine cravings to satisfy. Coffee Talk Tokyo is coming out sometime next year. Sea of Stars, Sea of Stars didn't come out in 2024. Pretty sure that was a 2023 game. Or maybe Sea of Stars came out. No, Sea of Stars was last year. Anyways, Sea of Stars is getting DLC, Throes of the Watchmaker, which will be free. That's coming out spring of next year. Oh yeah, this looks fun. Power Wash Simulator is a first-person game in which you scrub and power wash dirt off of various environments. The game has had various different DLCs and crossovers with things such as Back to the Future and Final Fantasy. And they've announced their new crossover pack, which is called Shrek Special Pack. It's coming out this fall. It will include 5 new levels, as well as new character model that dresses up in a full suit of armor. And in this game, you are going to run around cleaning up Shrek's swamp based on the hit DreamWorks movie. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute. I've seen Shrek. He keeps his swamp dirty. Why would you want to power wash something that is meant to be dirty? Judging by the trailer, it seems like someone has put a bunch of like pink, yellow, and blue, like pastel like colors throughout Shrek's swamp. So it seems like someone has vandalized Shrek's swamp and you are cleaning the vandalismness off of it. It's not like you're trying to make Shrek's swamp less dirty. There's a game coming out in which Date Everything. Date Everything is a dating simulator. You'll be able to romance 100 different characters that personify household objects like cabinets and shelves, or concepts like your overwhelming sense of dread. Each object and concept is rendered to look sexy as possible, and you'll choose if you want to foster love, hate, or friendship with each of them. Find the objects of your desire when Date Everything releases on October 24th, 2024. Nice cabinet. What time does it open? Oh boy. Trying to look at everything else that kind of came out. I don't want to go through everything because there's a lot of stuff. Pizza Tower is 2023's most outrageous platformer. It's on everything and is now coming to Nintendo Switch. I believe Nintendo Switch is out now. Oh yes, this is what I want to talk about. So they did 2 separate showcases. Your Friends and Mine over at Digital Eclipse, the folks behind games like The Making of Karateka, have announced a couple of different things. What we have is an amazing new Tetris collection celebrating 40 years of Tetris. Tetris Forever will include over 15 classic entries in the Tetris franchise from across the years, as well as a new Tetris Time Warp game that will shift across different play styles as you play. It will also have new documentary videos illuminating this series, which is pretty darn cool. Now my understanding is that this Tetris Forever is also going to be coming to other platforms. So if you are a fan of Tetris, if you want to explore the history of Tetris, you can do just that. It's coming to other consoles as well. And that's going to be out 2024. They're also going to put out the NES version of Tetris on Nintendo Switch Online. So if you want that kind of hit documentary style, stuff that you know and love from Tetris, you know and love about Tetris, you'll be able to do so because they're going to do it the way they always do it, Digital Eclipse. These are also the folks that did the Atari 50 collection, as well as The Making of Karateka and a bunch of other stuff. But anyways, if you want that documentary style experience with Tetris, they're going to do it for you. Goat Simulator 3 is coming to Switch. What else? Oh, they're doing a SpongeBob SquarePants game in which you play as Patrick Star. That's coming out October 4th. You are playing, it's called SpongeBob SquarePants, the Patrick Star game. I'm assuming the good folks at Nickelodeon don't have the confidence for Patrick to just be able to market his own game on his own. But anyways, SpongeBob SquarePants, the Patrick Star game, coming out October 4th on a bunch of stuff. They showed off the Capcom Fighting Collection, as well as the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. Is there anything else that I really... Oh, they showed off the Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remasters. They showed off the Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake. They announced that the Castlevania games that were on the Nintendo DS, which are Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin, and Order of Ecclesia, will be coming together in a new package that'll be available on other consoles as well, not just Nintendo Switch. And that Haunted Castle, an arcade game that is generally considered to be pretty bad, and it's kind of like a precursor to the original Castlevania, will also be in the collection as well. They showed off more Civilization 7 coming to Nintendo Switch February 11th. Tales of Graces F is getting a remaster. That's going to be the remaster of the 2010 PS3 game, which itself was a port of a 2009 Wii game. That's coming out January 17th. My Sims is back, y'all. My Sims is like a knockoff Animal Crossing style game. My Sims and My Sims Kingdom will be released on November 19th as part of the My Sims Cozy Bundle on Switch. Is that coming to other consoles? No, just the Switch. Well, okay. Five Nights at Freddy's, Help Wanted 2, and Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, are a part of Nintendo Switch. They'll also be getting free DLC titled Ruin. They showed off, a bunch of stuff. Funko Fusion, Horizon Adventures, Just Dance 2025, Epic Mickey Rebrushed, EA Sports Football Club 2025, and Tales of the Schreier, the Lord of the Rings game, all coming to Nintendo Switch as well. Yakuza Kiwami, that is the first Yakuza game, then remastered, coming to Nintendo Switch on October 24th. Whew. That was a lot. I got one more news story, and then we're going to take a break, and we're going to talk about the games that I've been playing. This is a long podcast. I appreciate you sticking it out with me. So, this came out last week. And it's about Ubisoft's once popular first-person shooter, Xdefiant. Basically saying that Xdefiant launched with a huge amount of players, a big number of players, but now the devs are struggling to keep players around. It was heavily inspired by games like Call of Duty, but the report is that the game might only have until Season 3 to turn things around, increase its player count, and start making more money, or the publisher could end post-launch updates and effectively kill the first-person shooter. Xdefiant launched in May for consoles and PC following numerous delays and a well-received beta. Ubisoft's Call of Duty-like free-to-play shooter came out of the gate with big player numbers, good reviews, and a solid amount of content. But Xdefiant is reportedly bleeding players, and Ubisoft has set a deadline for things to improve or could be over for the shooter. On August 30th, Insider Gamer reported that Ubisoft execs had started to sour on Xdefiant. At first, the publisher praised the success and revenue, but now it reportedly isn't happy with the shrinking player base and profits. According to Insider Gaming, Xdefiant has until Season 3, which will likely arrive in November, to improve things, or Ubisoft will stop supporting the game with updates and new content. It's reported that the game has been struggling to reach 20,000 concurrent players across all platforms. Another source told Insider Gaming that Ubisoft would be happy with that number, which seems to imply that the current number of players is even lower than that. Due to the lower player count and Ubisoft's deadline and concerns, some within Ubisoft San Francisco are worried about layoffs. The publisher already laid off some of the San Francisco employees earlier this month. Some staff blamed the leaders of the studio for not taking responsibility and working to improve the company's workplace culture. As previously reported by Insider Gaming in March, some employees claimed that a small group of people at the studio known as the Boys Club were making bad decisions, giving certain friends more power, and treating employees poorly. It suggested that this group led to the game being delayed multiple times. The plan is now to focus on Season 3 in the hopes of turning things around for Xdefiant. However, Season 3 will be landing around the time of Black Ops 6. Sources told the outlet that they aren't feeling too good about the game's or the studio's future. And one source said, expect more Ubisoft San Fran layoff headlines within 6 months. So that's the thing, right? It didn't hit. It didn't last. And now it's up against Black Ops 6, which in fairness, Black Ops 6 is a game that you have to pay for unless you have, Game Pass Ultimate. But this kind of goes back to what, I said about Concord. If you're not doing things differently, even in a free-to-play world, you might really, really struggle to attract and maintain that audience. I don't have much hope for Xdefiant. I thought it was okay, especially as a free-to-play game. It was all right. But all right is not good enough, even in a free-to-play market. Even when you can say, why spend $80 or whatever on Call of Duty Black Ops 6 when you can play this for free? I don't know, because, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 looks fun compared to Xdefiant. It looks cool and interesting compared to Xdefiant. I wish everybody at Ubisoft San Francisco the best of luck. It would be, awesome if Xdefiant, kicked out at 2 and kept on going beyond Season 3 and more, but I don't have much hopes. And I think if the people making the game don't have much hopes, I think the writing's on the walls. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the games that I've been playing, which include Call of Duty Black Ops 6. I got a chance to play that beta. We're going to talk about it. I've also been playing some Baldur's Gate 3, and maybe we'll talk a little more. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I want to take this moment to kind of alluded to it at the start of the show, but I have rejoined, actually, for that matter. I have the good folks at Big Red Barrel and myself have come to an understanding that I will be writing for them. I have joined Big Red Barrel as a writer. Not only that, but my first piece of written content for Big Red Barrel is out now. So here's what I need you to do. I'm assuming that whatever device you're listening to this podcast on has access to the internet. You can go to like a web browser. You didn't just plug your headphones into a microwave or something. So do me a favor. Go to bigredbarrel.com, and up at the front page, there is my written preview, of my time with the Black Ops 6 beta. The Black Ops 6 opening beta, the open beta is starting soon, so read it and then fire up the game and see for yourself. But I'm really, really happy to be back with Big Red Barrel. I'm really excited to be writing. I feel a lot more confident as a writer. I feel excited to be writing for them. And such welcoming opening arms. The editorial, the editorial stuff is awesome that they're doing. The podcast stuff is fantastic. The editors have been nothing but helpful. Really fantastic feedback and support for someone like me submitting work to them. It's been fantastic. Like one article in, and I can't say enough good things about Big Red Barrel. That being said, I also can't say enough good things about Black Ops 6 because I've been playing that early access beta courtesy of Game Pass Ultimate, and it is fantastic. It's really awesome. In the article that I wrote, I kind of like compared Call of Duty to like the annualized sports game franchise, right? And how when you're playing one, you're really looking for a small handful of changes between game to game to see what differences there really are and if they're substantial, right? And not only that, are they substantial for people who are both longtime, fans that show up every year and people who may be lapsed or new fans? You have to remember that the original Black Ops came out on the PS3 and Xbox 360. We're up to Black Ops 6 now. This series, this sub-series within the longer running Call of Duty franchise, it's very easy to say that Black Ops has gotten pretty long in the tooth, because it's not hard to say that Call of Duty has gotten pretty long in the tooth, especially being an annualized franchise. And especially with Modern Warfare 3 feeling pretty half-baked and underdeveloped, especially as it pertains to the single-player campaign in last year's game. That all being said, the biggest change from the Black Ops 6 open beta that I experienced was the new Omni movement system. If you remember, or if you don't, I'll remind you, Treyarch describes the new system as players being able to sprint, slide, and dive in any direction, forwards, sidestepping, and backpedaling. This allows people to move like never before and seamlessly chain combat maneuvers together, like sliding, diving, and a newly enhanced prone system that will allow for a full 360-degree range of motion. Meaning that you could be running forward and shooting sideways, which allows you to dive and shoot sideways, or slide and shoot sideways, or dive forward and then turn around in the air to react to enemies that are maybe behind you. And I gotta say, it's some of the most fun I've had with a Call of Duty movement system since Advanced Warfare. Advanced Warfare allowed you to slide, it was more like a dash almost, because you had the exoskeleton like jetpack thing. So it allowed you to jetpack up and down. It allowed you to dash back and forth. Side to side. I don't remember if it allowed you to dash backwards though. I think it was just side to side and the jetpack. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it. I've not played Advanced Warfare in a really long time. That being said, I thought Advanced Warfare was awesome. Originally coming out on the PS4. Fantastic game. Really, really awesome. And the movement system was a lot of fun. It felt like the first time in a while Call of Duty was taking its core movement systems and significantly changing it. We've seen other movement systems change over the years. At one point, they brought in like a more traditional jetpack style system in stuff like Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3. You could run sideways along walls, similar to stuff in Titanfall and Titanfall 2. In Modern Warfare, the reboot of Modern Warfare, they kind of brought in this tactical sprint system, so you could kind of hold your gun in the air and sprint faster than a typical run speed. They also introduced a mantle system, so you could kind of stick to cover and kind of poke and lean your head out. So what it really meant in something like Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, is that people were kind of sprinting to cover and then kind of attaching themselves almost like a cover-like system, poking their head in and out and then going. It still also had the sliding. It's like the just sliding on the ground. It still had the kind of dive on, through the air to the ground in prone position. So you kind of dive and land on your belly, but it didn't have the range of motion. It didn't have the ability to turn yet move in different directions. So that's really what Omni movement has done. You can still slide, you can still dive, but now you can do so with full 360-degree range of motion. And playing the demo, I was doing a lot of cool, like Max Payne, like John Woo style shit, right? Of, I'm diving through this window, shooting dudes from the outside as I leave the interior building and stuff like that. And it works both offensively. Like, I think it's fun to take it to an enemy when you are diving through the air and sliding and stuff like that. But it also works defensively, right? Because it's not just about you diving into a contested area, guns blazing, but also about using that system to slide and dive when you react to the enemies that are around you. So Omni movement, I think, works both offensively, but it also works defensively, which I think is the sign of a really well-rounded system, right? It's not just about offense, but also about defense. However, over the years since Advanced Warfare, Call of Duty has gotten really fast. Like the sprinting and the movement, especially when you factor in stuff like the tactical sprint, has resulted in Call of Duty feeling pretty freaking fast. That I would say, Modern Warfare 3, before I played Black Ops 6, I thought to myself, Modern Warfare 3, the reboot Modern Warfare 3, last year's game. I thought that was easily the fastest Call of Duty game they had ever made. Like, wicked fast. But then I played this year's game. And when you factor in the Omni movement speed, and just the raw speed of the game, this is without a doubt the fastest Call of Duty game I have ever played. It is wicked fast. That raw sprinting speed with that new freedom of movement, it enters this like really breakneck pace that is really, there's nothing quite like it in my humble opinion, which not only adds to the fun, but just the real appreciation for where Call of Duty is at, especially going back to games like the original Black Ops or even games like Advanced Warfare that really felt like they were changing the way Call of Duty played. As a result, I've had an absolute blast with my time playing Black Ops 6 as part of the beta. The open beta is coming up soon. I know they're going to be changing some things. They're going to add more unlockable content and stuff like that to the beta. But man, there's a good chance that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 could be one of the most exciting Call of Duty games in quite some time. Really looking forward to it. And I'm also really looking forward to seeing how that movement system works when you play the single player story mode, right? Because in the single player story mode, the enemies are not going to be nearly as smart as the human opponents in multiplayer, and they may not even be able to properly use the diving movement system as well. So the idea of just wasting a bunch of enemies in the single player and being able to take even more advantage and be even more, experimental with that movement stuff could be a lot of fun. So, Black Ops 6, it's out October 25th, PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, and Xbox One. Don't forget, as a Game Pass subscriber, you get access to that game day one. I'm really looking forward to it. I have nothing but nice things to say about that movement system. I'm curious to see if the movement system sticks, in the sense that, is everybody going to, in 6 months from now or 6 months after the game comes out, are people still going to be sliding and diving and using that movement system? Or are they going to go back to that Modern Warfare style of tactical sprint to cover, peek around the corners and play a little more slowly? Because even though Modern Warfare 3 is a very, very fast game, there are plenty of people that take that game slow and move tactically and thoughtfully from cover to cover in order to not leave themselves exposed. Very interested to see how that game turns out, because I have nothing but nice things to say about Black Ops 6. After I was, disappointed and bummed out by Star Wars Outlaws, I thought to myself, well, shit, I got to play something. I got to play something, because I don't know what I'm going to play between now and whenever the next big game that I want to play comes out. I got time on my hands, is what I thought to myself. And in doing so, I decided to pick up Baldur's Gate 3. Everybody tells me Baldur's Gate 3 is the greatest game of last year. Now, I got to admit a couple of things. I like RPGs, but I'm more of an action RPG guy. I can probably count on one hand the amount of turn-based strategy and tactical games that I really, really like. Off the top of my head, I really loved Marvel's Midnight Suns. I love XCOM Enemy Unknown, the first of the reboot XCOM games. And I really love Final Fantasy Tactics. I've enjoyed Persona 4, which is a turn-based JRPG. I've enjoyed the original Final Fantasy 7, and I've enjoyed the original, I've enjoyed Final Fantasy 9. So what? We got like 5 games, 6 games, if my math is correct. In the grand scheme of like turn-based and tactical and strategic RPGs, I would barely call myself a casual fan of those games. They're not typically for me because I enjoy the more action RPG stuff. I want to run around and cut dudes if the opportunity arises. I'm also not a big Dungeons and Dragons person. I recognize that Dungeons and Dragons has inspired almost every RPG video game that I've ever played, whether I directly influenced or not. So I recognize the importance, the prominence, and the influence that Dungeons and Dragons, the tabletop board game, has had on video game RPGs. I get it. So going into, kind of game of the year, like I kept thinking last year, I kept thinking to myself, I just don't know if Baldur's Gate is for me. I just, I would rather play an action RPG of some kind, even if it's a really dumbed down version of what you can do in something like Baldur's Gate. I would rather a more dumbed down, streamlined, easier experience because that's just where I'm at with gaming these days. I don't really want to think too much. I don't really want to, especially like in a tactical scenario, right? Like if you give me an open world game to run around it, I might be like, oh, I can climb here. I can do this. I can take this vantage point. I can do this and this and this, whatever. And then I can act it out without necessarily needing to do turn-based combat. But despite all that, I figured, what? Let's give Baldur's Gate a chance. And Baldur's Gate is without a doubt one of those dense, mechanically complicated, ambitious, turn-based strategy role-playing games. I think the thing that really sticks out to me with Baldur's Gate, I'm about 6-7 hours into the game. I've probably barely scratched the surface, but whatever. The initial reactions I had to playing Baldur's Gate is, they made an incredibly cinematic, visually gorgeous, one of these types of games with incredible production value and voice acting. Like the package that is Baldur's Gate 3 is incredibly impressive. But once you get past the, really ambitious and in-depth character creator, you are in a, pretty, serious tactical strategy role-playing game, for better or for worse. Now, luckily, I have played just enough of these games to have a kind of an idea of what the expectations are. I don't know what all the mechanics are. I don't know how to execute on a lot of the gameplay ideas, but I at least have a vague idea of what it's asking of me. And what I can say, I'm trying to find the right words. What I can say right now is that I've been really impressed by the gameplay. Like I actually think that it being an open world, turn-based game, when it comes to combat, when you're not in combat, you're just moving around freely. Like you don't take turns to move across the world, right? It's only when you're in combat that it's turn-based, right? You can move around freely. Well, the other thing that I didn't really consider until I started experimenting with the game is that, the game, you make a created character. You can choose from pre-established characters if you want. You meet your party of characters, and the party system is you and 3 other people, from what I've seen so far. But the thing I didn't realize is that, when you're walking around the open world, you can split that party up however you would like. So if you're seeing in the world that there's a potential combat encounter that you're about to come across, you can split up your party to be like, okay, I'm going to move you separately into a sniping position. I'm going to move you to, melee based warriors. I'm going to group you guys together because you're going to take a lot of damage and dish out a lot of damage, while my magician and my, archer or whatever move into a more protected position in which they can fire upon the enemies from a vantage point, right? But it also factors in things like stealth, like, oh, it's nighttime or it's in a dark cave and we're going to sneak as close to the enemies as possible to potentially do like a stealth attack to initiate combat. So we not only have the upper hand, but, from, getting the drop on them, but also we do bonus damage when we initiate the combat because we're attacking from the shadows, for example, right? Like, I didn't think about any of that stuff. I was just like walking into the environments being like, duh, let's fight. But the more I started to play around with the versatility, the more I became incredibly impressed at just what options are available and how reasonably easy it is to execute on those ideas. Yes, sometimes you're going to, have things blow up in your face because, you didn't realize the enemy was behind you or someone snuck up on you or whatever. But the idea of just placing your characters in this environment to prepare for battle so that it isn't feeling like a random thing that has happened, it's something that you actively prepared for, is incredibly exciting. I think the characters are fantastic. Just some of the best written characters from like an RPG that I've experienced in quite some time. I think the initial story is pretty quick to get your hooks in you deep. It does a pretty good job of setting up, why things are happening, what you need to do, and also how the party members aren't just random people, but people that need to be working together alongside you and the rest of each other for a good number of reasons. Like, I think it does a very good job of justifying that story pretty quickly. I think the writing is fantastic. Like, even some of the side characters that you meet are just like so well written, such, clever, well written dialogue. It's very easy for that world and that story to suck you in. I think really the only problem that myself or somebody who's not super familiar with these games is going to experience is whether that combat and whether that gameplay works for them or not. For the most part, the gameplay and combat has worked for me. I put the game on the absolute easiest settings I possibly can so that I don't feel so punished when I make a wrong choice. And when you factor in things like saving and stuff like that, you can, undo a lot of the stuff that you've done. But it's so cool to be like, hey, this character that I made that focuses on this type of combat has dialogue options pertaining to the combat expertise so that I can say, hey, I'm a real badass monk who not only knows people, but knows a thing or two about, the fighting spirit. I want to, converse with other warriors in order to get new dialogue informations out of them. Like, that stuff is super cool, right? It's not the first game to do that. But it works so naturally and so, effortlessly to, not only have your combat proficiencies work well in combat, but that the characters that you've made really have an impact on the world outside of combat based on the skills and abilities that you have for them. So I'm still trying to figure out if I really, really like Baldur's Gate or not. It's a long game. I don't know if I want to stick with it, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty impressed by what is there and what's available. I've run into some bugs. I've run into some issues and stuff like that, but it makes a really good first impression. It keeps your interest, for a long time, even when you're going through what feels like pretty, long combat encounters. Like the that stuff is fine. Like, I think that stuff is fine, but I also want to get through that combat so I can go back to the story stuff. So Baldur's Gate is going to be a thing I'm probably going to be picking at for quite some time, but for the most part, I really, really, I'm really impressed. I don't know if I love it. I think I like it, but I need to play more of it, and we shall see. I'll probably also keep picking at the Black Ops open beta while it is still available, and maybe we'll have more to say about both of those games next week, because this podcast has been long enough. I have been GnittWitt. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree. That's linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. I am all over the place. I really spread myself all over the internet if I can. Thank you so much for checking out Glitch Report, and we will see you all next week. Take it easy.